city or a town, a frown. The business of a crown, of the living that abounds, of the church and the announcements. It's doing what counts, the underground sound in a city or a town, a frown. The business of a crown, of the living that abounds, of the church and the announcements. It's doing what counts. The underground sound is the voice within, to give ear to the spirit and to flee from sin, to live for Jesus in the praise of Him, by not selling out for the praise of men, to do whatever it takes, no matter what the cost, to keep pushing up the weight, carrying the cross straight, bench pressing sin, defend the word that lacks, and your best mention Him, or then you're gon' die. Cause the underground sound ain't a city or a town, the business of a crown, of the living that abounds, of the church and the announcements. It's doing what counts, the underground sound in a city or a town, a frown.
Thank you for listening to the Underground Sound. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us create some more content, what we're working on right now, what I'm working on, my inspiration for doing this podcast is to get Julius Maddox, the world record holder in the bench press, to Pete Rubish's gym. It's not that far away. It's about a 5-hour drive, but I'd like to pay for the gas, pay for a hotel, pay for the food, if possible. If people would support that, that'd be great. These guys are planning on doing it anyways. I would just like to make it to where it's something that they would do regularly. You know, it wouldn't be a burden on them. So if you would buy a copy of my book, Scotch Strong, this is a workout book. It's a beginner to a advanced lifter could use this book, and it's fun, different styles of workouts, interesting. It's a nice change of pace or something to get started before you move on to something better, like doing one of Julius's programs or Pete's programs, working with Pete. Or you could buy my mixed martial arts book, and this is my personal journey through mixed martial arts. I've trained and competed and everything for years, and I wrote the whole entire experience down in a 160-page book. So it's a good read. A lot of lessons in there. Learn the hard way. That's why my nose is so crooked like this. So if you would like to support the project, we would really appreciate it. Just email me at scott.god@gmail.com and let me know that you want to support the project and buy a copy of my book. Or you could go to Pete Rubish's YouTube channel and sign up for personal training from him. Just let him know, hey, I want to sign up for personal training. Or you could just reach out to Julius Maddox, Irregular Strength, and get one of his programs as well. Let those guys know that you want to see that happen. Thank you for watching. Enjoy.
Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that?
All right, we got a live with Matt Wenning and Fish. I'm super pumped about today. I'm really excited. I love talking to both you guys. I've had Matt on before, and me and Pete are good friends. And me and Pete have been really into divine things taking place and stuff. And Matt, it just so happens that your total is exactly Pete's goal. His whole lifetime goal is what your total is, which your total was 2204, right, Raw?
Yeah.
Goodness.
So bro, yeah, okay, yeah. I want to just say, how do we get Pete there? But go ahead.
Obviously, like you've been established for a very long time. You've done geared, you've done raw, you've done everything. Like, what was the biggest takeaway that you had as far as getting to that total? Like, is there one thing that you go back to that you think of that made the biggest difference? And I know that's a very general question, but just, is there one piece of advice that you would have as far as achieving that? Because I just want to pick your brain a little bit. You know, you've done way more than I have. You're way more established than me. And I look up to guys like you because I haven't been there yet. And I'm grinding away and I want to get there.
Yeah. The big trick is just to not get injured. You know, let the body slowly grow and get stronger over time. You know, don't rush try to make huge leaps and bounds. You know, if you can kind of, I use training as part, I mean, training for me was always fun, but I never liked being banged. So that was really good for the type of methods that I used to get super strong, because those methods always rotated and mixed and matched. So I was never really training the exact same way all the time or the exact same exercises, which for some people, you know, you don't get that instant gratification of constantly breaking PRs in an exact lift. But what I found was the gratification came from, I just never felt injured. I never felt banged up. So I could always go 100% on every lift that I wanted to go hard on. And when I went into competition phases where I would do more specific work, I wasn't ever banged up because I didn't use those specific lifts in a general term to get super good. So I was always fresh and ready to attack. And I think that's the big problem with a lot of lifters now, is that they train so specific that they don't have any generalities. And then all of a sudden you're always trying to train around bumps and bruises, and that makes training way less fun. And the hard part is, I think, with training is trying to figure out a way to go in and push yourself and train super hard, but then not accumulate the mileage on the body to where everything feels like shit every time you go into the gym. You know, your elbows are trash because you're benching the exact same spot all the time. So what I found is I just needed a broad spectrum of exercises and movements that transferred over to being good at lifting, specifically powerlifting with a straight bar, but also reduce the mileage on the specificity, where I think that you see a lot of people that are successful right now that are good at powerlifting, they tend to overtrain the exact same shit too much.
Yeah, so that's actually interesting, because one thing I've been trying to do more of is like really break my form down more so than I ever have. And I'll be honest, you know, I trained like an asshole for years, and terrible form and no plan, nothing like that. And I just accumulated a lot of mileage. And right now I'm dealing with that as far as banged up hip, disc issues, things like that. So it caught up to me. And I'm just at that point where, I'm, like you said, I'm trying to really dial things back, break the form down, and get as technically proficient as I can on the main lifts. But it's interesting to hear you say that about like the accessory lifts and how that's a big part of it as well. Because, you know, I'll be honest, that's one thing I'm not as big on as I used to be. And I am trying to limit intensity quite a bit, like you said, as far as, you know, you don't want to just go hard all the time and accumulate that fatigue and that mileage. But the accessory thing's interesting.
Yeah. You pick exercises in the circle or in the cycle. I always picked exercises that forced me not to be able to go as hard, i.e., the safety bar was always or the yoke bar was always one of the hardest bars, because I'm 6'1", so I already had poor leverages to squat monster weights as far as the thoracic was concerned. So when I trained the safety bar, it knocked 100 to 150 pounds off of what I could do with a straight bar. But I noticed that every time my safety bar squat went up 10 or 15 pounds, my back squat went up 15 or 20. So as I trained the weakest bar, as long as I kept touching the regular bar enough to keep the feel or the groove, then what I noticed was the weakest bar created the most gain. So that's the hardest part to swallow, because everybody wants to go in and hit these monster numbers, but try to select exercises that put you in positions that won't let you truly max. By meaning, they might let you max on that particular position, but it's not going to be your strongest point. And that's a hard one to do, you know. It's just, I think that was what kept me in the game for so long. I was just able to pick things that didn't stroke my ego, and then train the things I needed to train at the right time, so I didn't accumulate near the mileage.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of you as like this incredible squatter. I mean, Is your best squat, what is it, like 843 or is it 400 kilos raw? And that's just raw I'm talking, but I know you've done quite a bit in gear as well.
Yeah, 865, which I think is
865.
390.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did an 865 squat, and then I did a 611 point something bench. My best deadlifting was in gear, and most of that was because the squat and the bench didn't beat me up as bad because I was in equipment. But the other thing too, people don't realize is that, you know, my best pull was 822, but I was 310, and you know, for some reason my deadlift just peaked somewhere around 30, 32, 33, and then once my other lifts got really strong in the raw realm, my deadlift fell back down to around 750. So when I did that 2204 total, I only did that with a 727 deadlift, I think.
So really, I mean, your capabilities were there. If you'd done more raw to be 2300 plus, I mean, that was where
Yeah,
that's
I would have. Yeah, my best lifts that I know I could have done that I missed. 2015, I barely missed a 903 squat, which would have been the all-time world record again. And then I never tried much over 611. I tried 615 a couple of times in the bench. I just never, the energy level was very, after that kind of squat, the energy level was dropped. So I would say my best bench would probably have been around 625. And then my best deadlift ever in comp was 822. But when I pulled 2010, I missed 844, which should have put me at number 9 of all time in the deadlifts at my weight class at that time. I pulled 825 for 2 standing on a 1-inch mat. So my deadlift was so fucking strong right there. And what was weird is that my deadlift was so strong right there, and I couldn't ever get it back to that point. It seemed like once I hit about 31, 32, it's like my deadlift just kept coming back. I think a lot of that had to do with the deadlift for some reason, probably because my arm length was better suited to bench press, so I had to stay leaned over a little more. But that was when the car accident when I was a kid really started to catch up to me, because I could not keep my L2 and L3 aligned, because when I got hit by that car, it kept my right leg in cast for another 6 months longer than my left. So I was always dealing with a 9 millimeter shorter right leg than left. So the special orthotics that I had in my shoe helped me go up to 37, 38 years old, but I started to get little pings and dings by the time I was 32, 33, and I had to, the only thing that really agitated it was the deadlift for some reason. The squat never bothered it. And so I had to train that deadlift by only pulling heavy about once a month. So everything else had to be built on. So that was kind of, I think the big thing for me is that not if I wouldn't have trained in gear when I was in my late 20s, but if I would have not probably got hit by that car when I was 6 years old and been in a wheelchair for a whole year, I think I probably would have been capable of mid 2300s, probably raw. You know, but I was happy with what I got, because when I was shooting for that 2204, the world record at that time before Lillibridge came along was 2202 by Dan Kovacs. So for me, that was my mental goal. I was wanting to get into the 2200s. You know, and at that, Don Reinhold had the biggest total ever done raw, which was 2297. So for me to be in the 2200s at that time was just, you know, was a feat. But yeah, I think if all the cards would have been played right and I wouldn't have had that leg length discrepancy, you can tell too by when you look at, like, if people are watching this, they can go back on my Instagram channel and watch me doing shrugs from yesterday. You can see my left spinal erector is much more pronounced than my right down at the lower L2, L3, and that's because my pelvis is shifted. So the deadlift always agitated that.
Man, I've got like a million questions, just because you know, you're so smart and you've done so much. I want to pick your brain a little bit, but if I can ask one more, and Scott, you can jump in here. But you know, you have had a hell of a squat, you've had a hell of a bench. On those 2 lifts in particular, are there any main cues that you used or utilized to that helped you along the way? Like, what goes into it for you as far as getting a big squat?
Okay, I would say the 2 major cues that most people I wouldn't say they overlook, but they follow other cues without having to think about it. And a couple of those cues are, one is that your chest cannot fall. So when you go to pick up the bar and you go to the descent of the squat, your sternum has to stay fully erect. Now, everybody gets caught up in where you should put your head, right? Like, Ripto tells people to squat with their head down, which I think is a horrible cue. You see a lot of IPF guys squat with their heads down.
Thank you.
Okay, it's fucking, in my opinion, it's ridiculous, right? Now, if you're an advanced, insanely good lifter, okay, you might be able to learn how to keep your sternum high without having your head high. But the average person, when the head drops, the chest drops, and that's when shit gets real. So the sternum staying high is fucking massive for hitting huge squats and deadlifts. Then that cue fixes almost everything from the tailbone up. Now, from the tailbone down, you have to learn how to, based on your body symmetry, you have to learn how to keep as straight of a shank as possible. Now, I'm not saying a vertical shank like what Louis says. I'm saying it needs to be as straight as you mechanically can keep it. And the reason is because when you maintain a vertical shank, you tend to load more posterior chain, and we all know that multiple muscles lift more than one muscle. So if I let my knee shift over my toe, what ends up happening is that the quadricep overpowers the movement, which can cause back failure and also hip shooting up because of the quadricep, and or you just don't stand up at all. But when you learn how to keep a more vertical shank, what ends up happening is you load more hamstring, you load more glute, and you load more total posterior chain muscle to assist the quadricep in helping the lift rise. So the one cue that I use to maintain that is I draw the knees out as hard as I can onto the IT band or to the lateral side of the ankle. So if you watch foot pressure, if you watch my foot pressure in my training videos, if I draw my knee out as hard as I can where I'm almost on the outside of my shoe, it forces my hamstring and glute medius especially, to assist the quadricep into straining, and then therefore I stay in a better mechanical position, and therefore I can lift more weight.
Gosh, that's freaking awesome, because that's exact. Oh man, that's what I've been working on, those things right there. And like, I've had a long time I've had a problem with them. Like, why are people looking down when they squat? It's going to pitch your chest forward, and then you're over, you're done with. So that was extremely helpful. That's exactly what I want to hear. As far as, I mean, that's immense help right there. Anything you want to add, Scott? Anything you want to ask?
Yeah, I got three things I want to say real quick. One, I love listening to Matt Wenning talk because he's so smart, but it also makes so much sense. Like, you make sense of everything, where it's like, it's not confusing. It's just like, it's like, it almost seems like obvious when you say things. Two, I can't believe what a pencil neck I look like right now. I'm looking at you guys, and I'm looking at myself. I'm like, geez, dude. Like, usually I'm the big guy. Like, what the hell's going on? This is horrible. And then, okay, so three, I want to ask, do you remember the car accident? Because I mean, listen, I've heard the story, and you said you got hit and you were like flown, like, I forget, like super far. The car was going really fast. You're 6 years old. It seems like a miracle to me. Like, when I hear this, it's like you should have died. And do you remember that at all? And it blows my mind about what you're saying about your leg. Like, that's crazy, man.
Well, I'll tell you this. I don't really remember getting hit by the car. I remember waking up in the ambulance. It was a really hot August day right before, I think it was about 2 weeks before first grade started. And I got hit by that car, got drug underneath it, and then when I flipped up, my head hit the pavement. There was a blood stain from my body on the concrete for like 20 years later. They didn't repave it for 20 years because it was a concrete road. So it wasn't made from blacktop, so they didn't strip it and redo it. It was there for a long time. And I remember going back and seeing the gouge marks of the bike dug into the concrete, and my head being splattered all open on the concrete and all that shit. But I don't really remember that happening. I just remember waking up in the ambulance in these pants. They put you in these, well, back then they put you in these inflatable pants that kept you anything from moving. So that way you couldn't do more damage if you woke up or started panicking, right? And I remember them being so fucking hot in the ambulance. And then they put me out again in the ambulance because I could see the lights. And then the next time I wake up, I'm in the surgery room, and my mom's in charge of surgery. She's working at the hospital. And so she's there through my leg surgeries. And I remember not being able to see and then hearing for about another 20, 30 seconds and then falling asleep. And then I wake up and I'm in full 80 casts up to my ass cheeks. And then I was basically homeschooled all of first grade because I couldn't get out of a wheelchair.
So, like, what kind of effect do you think that had on your overall outlook on life? And, like, from that point on, I mean, that had to have changed you immensely and everything moving forward.
Looking back at it now, I think what changed was I wasn't really scared of anything after that point. You know, once you got hit by a 50-mile-an-hour car, it kind of went backwards. You could either get really, conservative in your thought process, or you could go fucking buck wild. And I went crazy for, I would say, up until I started lifting pretty hard. I rode my bike really hard. I was into dirt bikes. I just like, well, shit, if a car can hit me at 50 miles an hour, then nothing's going to kill me, So that really upset my mom because I think she thought it would tone me down, but it ended up turning me into a fucking idiot for a while. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the biggest thing that probably hit me hard and made me do things a lot differently was, I was going into 8th grade. I was in 8th grade going into my freshman year of high school. My dad had died of an odd cancer that summer. And that sent me off to looking for father figures in the gym. And luckily, where I grew up, a guy named Tim Smith kind of took on that role, and he was a 500-pound bencher at 181 body weight at a local YMCA, which is nearly impossible to find. So I walk into the Y at a very young age, and I see this guy that's, not a very big dude, just thick, but very short and stout, and could already bench press 5 wheels. So I was automatically desensitized to what was heavy and what was light, So that had a huge impact on me at that time, because now that I look back at it, I was probably going to the gym to look for older father figures that could kind of guide me because I didn't have any real guidance at home. But I didn't know that what I was looking for at the time. But looking back, that's probably what it was.
Wow. So your dad passed away at that young of an age?
Yeah, 13.
Man, I can't even imagine, truthfully. I feel like that would, just change the entire course of your life. Like, I just can't even imagine. So,
yeah, that would have that could have went two ways, really, really good or really bad. And it was close to being really bad. I mean, I honestly think that if lifting wouldn't have found me, or I wouldn't have found lifting, that things could have been a lot worse because, my mom, due to my dad dying young and my sister having all these heart problems, we grew up almost poverty, but didn't know it. I didn't know it at the time. And, Muncie at that time as a city was a downgrading city with a lot of crime and a lot of bullshit. And a lot of the kids I went to high school with were thugs and criminals, and I'll bet you there's been 8 or 10 guys that have been murdered from my high school. It's just, there was a lot of crazy shit going on at that time in the 90s in Muncie. It was a pretty rough town. But the lifting really, really solidified me going in the opposite direction. And that's kind of what always made it fun for me. I always step back and go, look, you can be a great lifter. You can hit these massive totals. And the great thing is a lot of these coaches like Tim and all them would always tell me, he goes, but, always have your health first because, no matter how good of a lifter you are in a year or two, nobody's going to remember who you are unless you do something really, really awesome, like Ed Cohen or something like that, and it's true. So I never wanted to gamble away being super strong with my health benefits. I always told myself that I was going to get as strong as I could until it started to degrade my health, and then I'm out because for me, it wasn't worth it. I've already gambled with enough cards as far as, the car accidents and being reckless as a teenager and doing all these stupid things. For me, it was always a great outlet, and I feared most not being forgotten or not not being a superstar. I feared not being able to train because it's what pulled me out of my dark time. And that was the thing, is like, I would rather go in and train my ass off than I would compete and be a star 5,000 people that don't give a shit about me in 2 years. You know what I mean?
And, I can echo that sentiment, because it's like, in powerlifting, you got 15 minutes of fame, essentially. That's how it feels. And I remember back in like 2016 when everybody was like, oh man, you're the man, and everywhere you go, that's how it is. And you're hitting PRs all the time. Things are coming easy. Well, it's like, where is that now? 4 years later, it's like all those people, or most of them, couldn't care less. And you start to realize that. And it's like, I'm at the point where, I'm almost 30, I'll be 29 this year. And it's like, I couldn't care less about social media at this point. I don't care about impressing people. I want to do this for me. I enjoy it. But it's kind of like you said, it's like, it's a whole different mindset. And I've done some reckless things as far as what I've taken, what I've done. I've done some hard cycles, and done a lot of things where I knew I didn't feel healthy for long periods of time, because I was all about chasing that PR and impressing everyone and making sure everybody liked me and knew me. And you realize that just goes away. Like, that goes away.
Yeah.
The new guy comes along, and he's better. He's hitting better numbers, and then you're relevant, just like that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's the big thing you have to swallow. And that was luckily the things that I got to see growing up and was always instilled in my head. So for me, the loss of the health, or the loss of being able to have that outlet of training, which is what pulled me out of my dark area, was what the big fear for me was, is that I wanted to be able to go in and train. And if I had a blowed out knee or a fucked up back, or I couldn't go out and expend that bad energy that would have possibly turned me into a fucking criminal, then that would have been all gone. And I don't think I would have been able to redo from that. So I always went the long route. I always went the long road. I always went the smart way. And I always tried to outlast everyone versus outlift everyone. And that brought me to big world records. But I had to outlast people, because I ran into a lot of guys that were the next big thing. I mean, I'm 40, and I've run into 20 of the next big things in my whole career. And where the fuck are they now? They're nowhere. You see?
Man, I've had this thought before. Many times I've realized, I'm like, I used to compete with all these guys, or I used to see all these guys, hear about them, and they're not around anymore. And I'm not going to name names. It's not like that. It's just that it's really humbling to actually look back upon and be like, where all these guys were the top guys, and they're not even, you don't even know what they're doing anymore. It's incredibly humbling to think about it. And I'm sure like some of the people I'm talking about, and you have examples of your own, but it's wild. It's wild to think about in that regard. So.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I would tell everybody that I could, that's been in Pete's realm and my realm, is, get up to the top, have fun with it, but remember what the real important thing is. The important thing is stay healthy, stay in it for the long run, be a technical master of what you do. I'm more impressed now with people that do things perfect versus how much fucking weight's on the bar. Like, if somebody sends me a squat and it's absolutely impeccable, I am more impressed than if it's 250 pounds heavier and it looks like shit.
It's crazy, because when Scott approached me about doing these interviews and podcasts a month or so ago, I didn't really know what direction it would take me. And it's almost like a lot of times, it's like you guys are speaking to me, because I can relate to all this so much. And just as when we talked to Julius Maddox, he said some things, and everything you've said so far is hitting home so hard for me that I'm just like blown away. Like, I feel like even though we're going to share this with a bunch of people, it's like, this is exactly what I needed to hear. And to hear you say it and how much respect I have for you, it's just incredible, because this is exactly the stuff I've been thinking about that's close on my mind. And
Yes,
I appreciate it big time.
And if you're thinking about those types of things, you're going down the right road at 29, because in theory, if you do everything properly, you don't have your biggest lifts are in 5 years. You have 5 more years to 6 more years of completely stomping ass, if you can last that long.
Now, do you think, like, I've been thinking about this. Do you think taking a full year, let's say you're doing a very light cruise dose the whole year, and then you prepare for one meet. So let's say I'm preparing for one meet every 52 weeks or so, and my cycle is just for that meet, and I'm really kind of building up my technical proficiency along the way and only peaking that one time. Do you think that's a smart strategy as far as just lasting in the sport? Or because that's kind of what I'm kind of eyeing now, just like take a full year, lay off the gear for the most part, just enough tests to get me by, gradually ramp things up as need be, and then we go for that one meet. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. I mean, I do, and I'll tell you why. Because as you're starting to find out as you get older, your priorities are going to have to be a little bit transitioned, i.e., work, job, family. Your parents are getting older. Like you're going to have different things on your plate as you age. And I think prepping for one meet a year, especially when you're super strong, is a great strategy, because here's how I look at it. When you're training, the key to getting a tall peak in your training, which is your PR, is to develop a massive base underneath that pyramid. So if you draw a small triangle on a piece of paper, that large triangle is going to have to create the base point in order for you to reach that peak. That means that your conditioning, your mental state, your mobility, and your technical proficiency all have to be set in stone to work towards a taper. Now, as you get stronger, you're going to have to work harder for smaller amounts of higher numbers, right? So when you're younger and you bench press 200 at your first comp, it's not going to take that much to go to 250. But if you're benching 500, it may take a year or two to go to 550. Right? Because you're just talking about ceiling limits of potential and whatnot. The other big thing too is you have to learn how to get as strong as you possibly can on minimal gear, because once you go to maximal drug usage, there's nowhere to go but down. So the problem is once you've saturated those cells to the max, which is different for everyone based on how many muscle receptors you have, and most importantly, based on how unhealthy the drugs make you. So some people can take 2-3 grams of testosterone a week and it not affect their blood pressure one iota. And some guys can take only 250 milligrams of testosterone and they already have bad blood pressure, and now it's escalated and elevated to the point of having serious health parameters, So the point is that we all have a different card laid out of how much we can take. And I try to tell people that ask me about gear is take as much as you can still stay healthy with, because if a person can fly under the radar with a minimal amount of drugs for 15 years, they're going to be way stronger than taking massive cycles for 3. It's all about longevity and consistency, right? If I can go under the radar, right, you don't build a big savings account by throwing $200,000 in your savings account and never touching it again. You do it by throwing in a budgeted amount, a small tolerable amount for a long period of time, and that develops way more money, right, per se. So the point is in my opinion, drugs are the same way. You have to find out what the amount is you can take that gives you the performance sector without the health risk or problem, because at the end of the day, if it makes you unhealthy, then at the end of the day, you're not going to have as long of a career, therefore your chances of having higher numbers are limited. So some of the strongest guys in the world, and like I said, we don't go into talking about gear a whole lot, but I'll give you my opinion on it. Some of the strongest guys in the world that I've ever met in my life were only taking 750 milligrams of testosterone and then playing around with a little bit of D-ball or anadrol right before a contest. Anything more than that tends to cause more health than good. I mean, you got guys, that I don't need to name them, but you know who they are, that tell people to take 2 and 3 grams of test per week and all this crazy shit. And then you're just like, man, dude, like, to me, it's just reckless, And like, the hardest part with the human body or the human mind is that, if we take 20 milligrams of D-ball and it makes us 5% stronger, we think 100 milligrams of D-ball is going to make us 20% stronger. When in reality, it's not the case,
Well, that's what I've always found. There's a huge point of diminishing returns with any gear usage. And for me, what I personally always found is, not to say I've gone higher. I'll tell you flat out, I've pushed test to like 1,700 at one point before a meet. But what I always find is when I do these cycles where I'm trying to like, oh man, I'm going to go all out, take all the things, real high dosages, I almost do worse. And it's like, I feel like crap. My training suffers because I'm relying on the gear mentally, and my training gets a little lazier. For me, like 750 milligrams is the ceiling for test, where there's a huge point of diminishing returns past that point. And I found similar things with other compounds. Like personally for Anavar, I've taken higher. Like I said, I've tested all these things, but I find that anything over like 50 milligrams of Anavar a day, I don't get any extra benefits. So for every drug, there is a point of diminishing return. And it's like that with every single drug, guys. So I'm not saying like I'm any better. I've abused things. I've tried crazy doses. I've done all that. I'll tell you that. But there's definitely a point where it's like you just don't get any stronger, and it almost makes you feel worse. Your training falls apart, injuries, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think the thing of it is, and there's better guys to talk to about all the science behind it, but I'll tell you my feelings on it. Once you go over 750 milligrams, it starts to raise the blood pressure and anxiety up to a point that it causes the stress level of not only the training, but just surviving. The body starts to realize there's poisonous shit going on in the system, right? And that's when it starts to create almost this blockade of other hormones to block you out. So my thought process is, if you're thinking about taking drugs, do it the long game, stay under 800-900 blood level. Don't go too much above that, and your body's going to be ticking and talking pretty fast. But yeah, I mean, you hear about these guys taking these monster cycles, and then they have 1 and 2 and 3, maybe even close to 3-year careers. And they're like, the potential of this person was so much higher than what they've shown because they went the short route versus the long route,
Yeah, I mean, I've made those mistakes. Like I wish I could go back and do things differently. And my body's beat up, and I've done a lot of stupid things. There's so many things I wish I could have done differently, but at the same time, it's a learning process, and it's something you can relate to with other people. So
sure. Yeah, I mean that's a great position to have too. Everything's an experiment, and everything's a live and learn process. And some people will start with a little bit more cards on the table than others, both mentally and physically. Some people have that grinder gear mentally that they'll push their bodies through shit. Other people don't. Some people have great muscle and tendon genetics and leverages, and other people don't. But at the end of the day, all of us respect hard work. I mean, if somebody wants to bust their fucking ass to reach a 400-pound bench and that's their genetic limit, I'm happy as shit for them. I don't look down on somebody because they bench or squat or deadlift less than me. I just want them to be as technically proficient as their anthropometrics or body structure will allow, and that to me is the right path to go in the right way.
100% agree. Honestly, I know, how long have we been talking here? 30 minutes, but it feels like you're literally probably the smartest person I've talked to. And I didn't know that. I knew you were, I respected you, but I'm like, everything you've said, it clicks 100% with my train of thought nowadays. So it's just really cool to see that. But Scott, is there anything you want to jump in here, buddy?
Yeah. Did you, Matt, by any chance get a chance to watch those videos I sent you of Pete? And I'm interested on your critique of Pete and what you think he should do. Like, what do you see specifically?
Actually, I did. I watched it. Did you send them to me on Instagram?
I think I sent them on Messenger on Facebook. I think
you sent them on Messenger.
They were YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Latest.
Hold on, I'm scrolling back right now. You sent me some technical proficiency makeovers, and it had a slingshot banner on the back. Is that what you're talking about? All right, let's look at them real quick. So I did look at them, but it's been about a week and a half, so I'm not going to make any. I'm going to watch them right now. So Pete's here benching. We got 100 kg for a set of 3. If I'm watching this right now, what I'm looking for is any technical issues in the wrist or the lat. Usually those are the 2 big things. So if I were to change anything on what Pete was doing, what I would do is I would work on straightening my wrist just a slight bit to take some pressure off the shoulder and put it on the tricep. Okay. And I would also narrow my grip about 1 inch per hand. And the reason I'm saying that is because if you look at the bone position at lockout, you don't have a very linear arm, which is going to cause the body to want to rotate, acryliate the shoulder. And it also causes, when you look at from the side view, it causes the bar to want to go over the chin at the top versus kind of stay over the chest. I think with a little bit of a narrower grip and a straighter wrist, you're going to have a more vertical up and down bench press position, which is going to do two things. One, it's going to help lock down the lat, and it's going to force the tricep against the lat muscle in order to give you kind of your own bench shirt raw. So if you watch some old videos like Bill Kazmaier, he talks about his tricep rubbing against his lat to almost create the proper friction point on the shoulder. So I think with a little bit of a narrower grip with your elbows tucked in a little bit harder, it's just going to make the bench press a little bit more A to B vertical and keep it a little bit more off your shoulder, giving you a little bit more mileage. But I mean, that's just what I can see from the video and what my own personal cue changes would be on that. But I mean, like I said, I always look for bone mechanics, and to me, it looks like with that grip width, it's just a little bit cocked. You know, instead of being like a piston, you're a little bit angled out. You got what I'm saying? So even though that might shorten your distance down an inch, if it's putting that shoulder at more of an angle, then it's causing more AC and more anterior shoulder issue. But the thing of it is that might feel more natural if your tricep lags behind your strength of your shoulder. So what I'd ask is, what do you do for work, Pete?
I honestly email clients all day, and I train people in person.
Awesome. So if you think about what he's doing, he's sitting at a computer with everything anterior. So like I'm sitting at this desk right now and my back's starting to get pissed off because I'm not like this. I'm more starting to lean in. Well, that can cause shoulder anterior dominance. So what I would do to fix that over time would be to work on more tricep dominant movements pre-bench press, and then also warm up the scapular muscles before you bench press, doing a lot of lat pull downs, face pulls of such, you know, like Wenning warm-up style. A lot of that was designed for pre-fatigue at first mentally, but then after that, what I learned was a word called potentiation. So what I found was that my technique got better in the bench as I slightly pre-fatigued both my tricep and my lat, because it kind of gave my brain the answer to the muscle question before the test. So if I'm going to go in and bench press and my shoulder girdle, i.e. my shoulder blade muscles are very hot and activated, and my triceps are hot and activated, when I go into bench, what am I going to use? I'm going to use the muscles that I told the body I wanted them to use. So that would be my overall view on that bench press, you know. On the squat.
Could I ask you about the bench real quick, though?
Yeah,
so,
go ahead.
Just because I want to. So right now I've been going middle fingers on the rings. So you're saying move it in more like pinkies on the rings or so? But
I can see so I don't know how wide you probably have the same shoulder width as me. I don't know, but I can see the ring outside of my pinky when I bench 6'11".
Okay.
So I would say go to the pinky and at least train there for a while and see if it starts to feel more natural. You know, things like that, when you change stuff and you're already super strong, it has to come slow. Because if I say, well, this is the exact position you need to go to, and you change it to that exact position, it could take a long time. So what I would do is maybe 2 out of the 4 training cycle or sessions that you do per month, put in that new bench press position and just train it for a while and start slowly giving it more and more motor pattern. That way the body will have a nice smooth adjustment to it versus trying to change everything dramatically, right?
And then 2 other questions about that. I get all my problems with bench that have kind of held me back lately is elbow pain right on the bone here, the point of the elbow. And is that from not tucking the elbows enough? Or that's partially why I widened it out, because I was getting a little less pain when I would go wider. But the more narrow grip would rile up the olecranon. I don't know, olecranon.
I'll tell you why I think your elbows are bothering you by watching something else. So when I'm watching your squat, you got your hands in super close and your wrists are rolled way back, which is a lot of elbow pressure on the squat. So as you get thicker and as your bench press grows better, your hands are going to have to start to come out wider in order to relieve the stress off your elbow. I think you're getting elbow pressure from the squat bar.
You know what's funny about that? I don't know which video that is, but we just widened it back out. So right now I'm trying to get more of an angle like this instead of like this. And I switched to the claw grip to try to get my elbow back a little more. So this crazy that you say that, because we literally just swapped that out recently. But yeah, I'll try out the.
I would say widen out your positioning on your hands on your squat at least a foot. When I benched 611 and when I did an 844 shirted bench, my pinkies on a mastodon bar, my pinkies were against the collars. Wow. Because if I had been closer than that, it started to put stress on my elbow and my shoulder.
Okay. And then your bench would suffer right after. Okay.
Exactly. So now if I'm watching your squat, no, go ahead.
Can I ask one more thing? So I know Louis has said this before too. Benching in a straight line, that's the most powerful way, because I hear people say press in a J motion too. What could you break that down a little more? You say it's the wrist position. Is that what?
Well, if you look at the data that's been collected for the bench press, and the people that say the J line or the curve, they're not incorrect. But the problem is that a lot of that data was collected a long, long time ago, and the proficiency of the bench pressers that did it were good at their time, but I wouldn't say are Maddox's or Stan Efferding's or me or you or anybody else. And I'm not saying that to bust people's balls, but I'm saying that if you look back in the old days, thumbless grip was still allowed and they let the wrist roll over, right? Like a lot of the old timers had that really bent wrist, which causes the curve to be more dramatic. The other major issue too is that there were only a handful of guys back in the day when that data was collected that were talking about insanely strong triceps to bench big weights. They still thought that pecs and shoulders is what moved that weight. So a straight line in physics terms is the shortest point to one distance. The reason that I don't like the J curve, you're always going to have a little bit of it. When I say press in a straight line, it's going to feel straight to you, but if we were to put it on a computer, it's still going to have some curvature motion to it. The key is just make it straighter. You want to make it as straight as you can. And the reason that you do that is because you turn the bench presses into an elbow extension and flexion movement versus a shoulder rotation movement. Because you remember in the old days, they thought that the bench press was built off of pec and shoulders. You know, what do? You have to go to a high school right now, down from the road from any of us, and they go, hey, I want to build some chest. What do I need to do? What are they going to tell you? Oh, you need to bench press. It's going to make your chest bigger. It's not a chest exercise. It's an arm exercise if you do it correctly, right? So the trick is when you straighten, when you go from a wrist to here to a wrist to there, it's going to cause everything to get in a straighter line. And then when you bench press, it's going to be straight. Well, in the old days, if I did a thumbless grip and had my wrist turned like this, of course it's going to make me go into a curve, right? So my thought process is that you don't ever make it a straight line, you just make it a straighter. So my thought process is the stronger your triceps get and the less you use your anterior delt and pec, the straighter your bench press is going to become. Now, is it ever going to be a true straight line? The answer is no. But it's going to be straighter, therefore less shoulder, therefore less mileage.
And would you say that plays a big role too in like avoiding pec tears? Because everybody strained like the fascia right here, where the pec attaches to the shoulder, and that injury pops up all the time.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think that a lot of those injuries. I think a lot of those injuries are caused by lack of the proper motor recruitment, and I think that if the guys were to slowly start to implement a little bit more of those Wenning warm-ups, like what I tell people to do, which 2 out of the 3 exercises are trying to isolate the weakest links, being the tricep and lat stabilizer. I think what happens when you get pec tears is that your pecs become directly stronger than your lat can sustain stability for, and then it puts you in a bad position when it goes to max effort. Like, you know, you guys, all 3 of us both know, you can't teach technique with max. When you go to max, you go to whatever your body is wired to lift, right? So how do you change technique? You change technique by reinforcement of motor patterns under submaximal load. So if I'm doing light warm-ups of triceps and lats, over time, that is going to over-dominate the shoulder joint anteriorly, meaning the pec and the anterior delt are going to slowly want to do less and less work, therefore they're safer. You want to make those muscles secondary lifters. And the reason you see pec tears is because when it goes heavy, neurologically, the body goes to the pec and anterior delt as the maximal load lifter, and that's when it blows off, right?
Yes, sir. Wow. That's really useful. It's just I've never thought of things in this regard. So, and bench has always been my worst lift by far. So, I really appreciate that. And squat, I'll preface things with squat. My right hip labrum, I partially tore it like 7-8 years ago. It has crazy amounts of impingement there, and it just throws everything off.
Which one is it?
The right hip. So my right hip's really messed up. Like I have a hard time getting down, and I have to do so much mobility work beforehand. And I think that's a lot of what causes the butt wink. What's that?
You want a trick? I said I'll tell you a trick.
Let's hear it.
Get you some of that floss, you know, that rubber band shit that's real thin, but you wrap joints with and wrap muscles with.
I've got some.
Take it
Okay.
and put it around your hip socket and do the first 4 sets of your squat workouts with it around your hip socket. You know why people ask me all the time, hey Matt, why do you have that knee wrap around your hip? Because I'm loosening that hip up. When I put pressure on it, right, with that wrap, then it's causing it to free itself up, and now it's more loose when I do my heavy shit.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. I'll definitely do that.
Yeah, try it. But just like the first 4 sets, you're warming up.
But I mean, be brutally honest. Like, what can I work on here? And I know you talked about the hand thing, and I literally, I can't believe you said that because I just changed that up, and I'm trying to bring my elbows in more and get my arm angle out more and keep my elbows back a little bit. But I've never trained barefoot. I'm trying to do that to establish the mobility to when I go back to heeled shoes, I'll possibly have less of that lumbar flexion and be in a more stable position.
So you would be one of the few guys I would tell to go to the heeled shoe based on the torn labrum, because I'm a very anti-heeled shoe kind of dude. But if somebody has a torn labrum in their hip, then it's going to help with keeping the back more upright. It's going to put a little more pressure on the knee. But if we're in a perfect world with no injuries, the first things I would fix would be I would turn the toes a little straighter on the feet. The reason being it's going to load the glute medius and the IT band. The next thing, if you watch your squat, what the first motion that you do is you don't let your knee go over your toe, but you bend a certain maybe 15 degrees forward or instead of pushing out. So what I would say is before you start to go down in the squat, try to take your knees over your ankles to the outside. And just that one cue, play around with it and see if it puts the pressure in a better area and it keeps the butt wink from coming. Because when I watch the side squat video, which I'm watching right now, what I see is that the knee initiates the movement, but it initiates the movement by going to the toe. So if you guys all get on that and watch it, you guys can see it right now. Like if you watch that side video, the first motion down is the knee goes to not to the toe, but close to the toe joint. So if you can keep that a little bit more vertical and open your knee up harder, it's going to force your back straighter without having to have the butt wink. And then I think if you take your hands out a foot wider, it's going to pull the elbow pressure off for the bench press.
Yes, sir. That's very helpful. Because I'm gonna, I'm squatting and bench in particular. I need to get them as technical as possible before I compete again and start going heavy. And just like you said, I've been trying to do a lot of sub-maximal work where I gradually strengthen the tendons and joints, slowly going up and becoming more efficient with the technique. So that when it gets heavy, hopefully the motor patterns are more ingrained and I don't have to think about it as much. Because when I'm squatting right now, Matt, like I'm thinking about 5 different cues and it's not a subconscious movement to me right now because I'm trying to get all these things right. And I have another thing where my torso rotates to the left. So I'll be going down and it's probably from the impingement, but I started getting a little torso rotation and It's actually
Here's
affected my
what I would
deadlift.
do. So we need more ligament and tendon density, we need more soft tissue dexterity, and we need more core stabilization and strength due to a labral tear in the hip, which has reprogrammed the brain to skate away from that labrum. So what I would do if it were me, based on the squat, is I would do a ton of planking work, front and side planks before I squat, to lock in the transverse abdominal muscles and force them to stay linear. Then what I would do is that I would work on Wenning warm-up style warm-ups, where I would do, even if you got like a dip belt and a hanging kettlebell, 4 sets of 25, standing on 2 benches, like a belt squat, like my belt squat, but you don't have to exactly have it. And just sit back and go through 100, 4 sets of 25, 100 reps of perfection of squat technique in a traction-based environment that can force you to learn the motor pattern and get that twist out before you actually start loading the core lift. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. I'll
Do
definitely
that
try
and
that
your
out.
motor patterns will, do that and your motor patterns will drastically change fast, and you'll start to notice that your body will actually function the way it's supposed to.
And that's one more question I want to touch on here, or like what you just said. I want to build on that with, most people don't think of the motor pattern, how important that is in all these main lifts. And that's something I overlooked for a while. It was just a matter of, getting the weight up. That's all I ever thought, like heavier, let's get the weight up. But the motor pattern is what's going to keep you from getting injured in the long term. Isn't that correct? The proper motor patterns.
Exactly. And here's where you're on both sides of the spectrum. You're on the hardest side of the spectrum as far as you go, Pete, because motor patterns, in my opinion, and I'm sure there's other things, but there's 2 things that force motor patterns to adapt and sometimes not adapt the right way. 1, muscular imbalances. 2, injuries. Those 2 things is what changes a perfect motor pattern and can cause it to go backwards the other way, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with a whole nother sleuth of injuries that have occurred because of that one changing the motor pattern. So what you have to do is go back and relearn the motor pattern, teach the body that everything's okay, and then plug in the core lift. And that's why you're starting to learn that you're probably only going to be able to peak once a year, because you're going to have a good 4 to 6 month cycle of reprogramming to work back around injuries and nicks and dings that cause that motor pattern to want to change. So in that 4 to 6 month period, pre getting ready for a meet, almost your off season downtime, your major goal should be correct and perfect motor patterns and correct and perfect muscle imbalances. You get those 2 things straight, you can go right back into loading and work your way back up. And next thing you know, you're building a platform off of a massive base that has no weaknesses.
Wow, that without even thinking quite along those terms, it's almost like what I've been planning to do here. But literally take 12 months and just trying to reprogram the motor patterns. That's what I'm trying to do now, because it's I'll be honest, it was such a clusterfuck as far as before with the injuries and things being terrible and never thinking about it, putting the thought into it. So I'm trying to, I'm not working from the best base as far as I'm already beat up and have incorrect motor patterns programmed in, but I'm trying to reset those. So that's very cool to hear.
Yeah. You just got to honestly, in your position, you just have to be a super dickhead to yourself and not let yourself do things wrong. And it's hard because we all deal with that at certain times. We've been great lifters. We have egos set into the position where, why am I doing this? This is elementary. But everything has to go back to the baseline in order to go back up, especially if you've incurred, injuries and nicks and bruises along the way that are going to start to want to change things. The body only understands to get shit done. It doesn't understand right or wrong or improper motor patterns or weakness muscle groups. It's just trying to survive the shit you're putting it through. Give it back basic math before you teach it algebra again, and you'll find that you're way better than if you just try to stay up in the harder math or the harder squatting skills. Go back down and learn everything from the baseline again, then build it back up. It's hard because once you're so strong, you feel like if you let go of the massive weights that they're not going to come back, and that's not the case at all. They actually come back stronger. I'm not saying that you don't do max effort work and you don't do speed work, but if you're doing it with improper technique, you're creating a bad motor pattern. Therefore, the body's only going to know what you teach it.
Makes perfect sense to me. Wow. It's good to have that clarification and reinforcement. So I appreciate
Sure.
that. Scott, what do you got, buddy?
On the days when Pete benches, what should his Wenning warm up look like? Like, what should he specifically? What exercises should he do? And also for the muscular imbalances you're talking about, what kind of exercises? Like, what should that look like?
Okay, well, let's take a look. The problem is when I do this online for people, what I do is I have to sit there and just basically watch it over and over and over again until I get my thought process on it. But the first thing I would do would be he's going to need to do. Do you have a pretty good, like, let's say if you do tricep pushdowns, do your right and left side fail at roughly the same time? Like, are you equal on both sides?
Okay, I've done single arm tricep extensions on the cable, and my left arm is much weaker.
Okay, so if your left arm's much weaker, the first thing you're going to do is add an extra set to the left side of everything you do in the warm-up. So it's going to be 4 sets of 25 of 3 exercises, but it's going to be 5 sets on the left side. That is going to slowly start to make the imbalance wrong. Remember this, if you're doing a bilateral movement, squat, deadlift, or a bench press, you're only as strong as your weakest side, meaning that the nervous system, due to balance, coordination, and motor recruitment, is only going to recruit as much on the strong side as the weak side can sustain. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if I do a 5th set on the weak side, automatically I'm going to get strong just by doing that, because I'm improving the imbalance from left to right. Therefore, neurologically, I'm going to be able to push harder. The next thing I'm going to do is, if I'm looking at it from a baseline standpoint, I would imagine that the reason that your bench press is hard, your hardest lift to try to get dialed in correctly, is because you're a good deadlifter, right? Because you got pretty decently long arms.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I mean, that I'm working on too, and but that's a whole nother matter. But yeah, deadlift is by far my strongest. So.
Okay, you can tell your deadlift's your strongest due to how long your bar path is on your bench. So that has a lot to do with your humerus bone, which is your tricep bicep bone there. And what you're going to have to do is get your triceps insanely strong down by your elbow. So a lot of JM presses, like what I talked about in my YouTube video, you're going to need to do those at least once, if not twice a month. A lot of your tricep training needs to start growing down the medial head of the tricep, meaning that a lot of things are going to need to be like overhead, and they're going to need to be like into the face on extensions, like this way. So when I was benching 611, I could take a bar out with my finger on the smooth, come down and roll it into my neck and straighten it for sets of 3 to 4 with 405. That's all arm. Yeah, so I'm doing JM presses super strict with 405, okay, which is fucking crazy. But the point is that when I went to flex on that bench and punch it, right, and hit that bench hard, what muscle did my body go to straighten that fucking weight out? It went to my arms, not my pecs. So I never had a pec pain. Never had a pec strain, never had a pec tear, ever, okay? But the key was I neurologically made my body understand that the triceps were the muscle they were going to go to when shit got real, instead of my pec or my shoulder. That's the other reason I want you to move your hands in on the bench, okay?
Okay.
The next thing is we're going to need more lat stability. So being a good deadlifter, your lower lats are probably pretty strong and your rhomboids are probably pretty good. But there's got to be a muscle in your scap that is behind the others. It could be a subscapular muscle, could be a rhomboid, it could be a rear delt. I don't know, because like I said, that stuff I'd have to kind of see in person. But what you need to do is find which back exercises you really suck at, like a pull over or like a rear delt fly. There's got to be something that goes, man, this is way fucking harder than all the other ones for some reason. That's the weak muscle group that's not going to stabilize the shoulder joint. So that muscle needs to be plugged into the warm-up. So we need a tricep dominant medial head tricep movement. We need some sort of a back muscle that's causing a imperfection in shoulder stability. And then we need an actual pressing movement that is not in your competition position as far as grip is concerned, meaning like I did a lot of my winning warm-ups like hammer grips. Because, see, I'm already getting a lot of mileage this way, right? Because I'm bench pressing. But if I do stuff like here and stuff like here and stuff like here and maybe even stuff like here, and then change my incline, flat, decline, feet up, whatever. But the point is that I'm going to slowly increase the volume of my bench press at a slightly different angle. Therefore, I'm going to get stronger without the mileage because I'm not putting direct mileage in my competition position.
That makes sense. I'll definitely give that a try. I'm trying to think of like the weakest back movement, but
yeah, for a lot of powerlifters, that when they tend to do a row or they tend to do a lat pull down, they use more trap than they do subscapular muscle. So try to find out usually whichever muscle, if you look in a mirror, whichever muscle on your back is the most dominant, it's the one that's preceding the rows. It's preceding the back work that you think might be working that, scapular muscle system. But a lot of times what happens is the body just finds one particular muscle group to try to do everything. So find which other muscle group that is not and do it, a lot of it. You know what I mean?
makes sense. Okay. Could definitely do that.
That's how you make your winning warm-up. It's all based on weaknesses.
Now, what about for the legs? Because I know, Pete, you're doing you do those single leg squats, right?
I love Bulgarian split squats. They've been my bread and butter. They work I just love those. And my quads are by far my weakest lower body muscle because I'll be flat out, I'll be straight with you. I've been very lazy in the past about training quads and everything and even squatting because of my bad hip. So I just I would literally squat with my low back. That's how my legs were pencils and I was squatting so much just because of my low back strength. But my quads are extremely weak.
Yeah.
And I'm using split squats to try to make sure there's no imbalances between each leg and then also strengthen the quads. And it's been working so far, but that's my bread and butter.
No, I like that idea because you're going towards your weakest link, which sometimes you can tell aesthetically which muscles those are going to be. That's how I pointed out the medial head on the tricep. The only thing you got to be careful with is, and a lot of people don't know this, is that the quadricep is a lot of muscle tissue that runs into a joint that's unlike any other joint in the body, which is your kneecap, right? The body's developed a kneecap genetically not only to protect you when you fall, but it's also a lever system. Think about the hamstrings. The hamstrings go in and attach to the back side of the leg. They don't have a kneecap that goes around the joint. So a little bit of quadricep goes a long way. What you have to be careful with is that your quads don't start to over-dominate. And if you already have an insanely strong posterior chain, the reason I'm kind of don't want to tell you what to do on a podcast is because for what I would tell you to fix, everybody else is going to do, and it's not for them. It would only be for you. You get what I'm saying? So yeah, I would agree that legs need to be stronger, but for the majority of the population, it's the opposite way around. The backside of their body, their low back, glutes, and hamstrings aren't strong enough to squat what they need, and they have too much quad. So now you're at a position, you're starting to understand that a lot of times what advanced people need isn't what beginners and intermediate or even decent people need. It becomes a very specific muscle task of training that the body needs that is unlike a lot of other people. Fortunate for me, my quads were fucking ginormous, and I was never a quad dominant squatter. I just had strong, big ass fucking legs. So I was always trying to catch up the hamstrings and the glutes to the strength of my quads. And once they equalized, I broke world. That took 12 years. But the point being is that, if I were to look at your squat right now, if you can maintain a posterior chain dominant technique, but gain some more leg strength, you're going to have it fucking whipped.
That makes sense because anytime I go heavy on high bar, I pitch forward. It's just a lot of, that's by far the biggest weakness, and it's simply out of neglect. So I do think it's pretty much the opposite of most people. But for me, look at my body shape and you see my quads are pathetic, and I'm working on that hard. So that makes sense. Just like the triceps would be the weakness. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Now, what do you think about I'm just interested. Do you think Pete's at a good weight class for him? 242. I think what do you weigh, Pete? 250?
Yeah, I mean, I've been putting more muscle on and gaining some weight over the years, but I'm not. I don't know.
You're
242 is what
not
I'm doing.
you're 6 foot. I mean, you could probably out a lot, I bet. What do you think? I'm just interested.
So I'm 6'1", and my strongest raw, I was about 296. That's where I felt 294 to 296 is where I felt my strongest. I pushed all the way up into the high 315 and then cut to 308 body weight for a while in gear, and that's when my deadlift was my strongest. But yeah, I mean, you're going to be fighting leverages, and my guesstimate, based on the fact of how you tell me how you squat and your deadlift, my guesstimate is you have a shorter torso and longer legs and longer limbs as far as arms and leg length, based on quadricep size and arm length. That is going to always make you posterior chain dominant, which is a good and bad thing if you're trying to put on muscle down by the joint, i.e. the kneecap or the elbow, right? Body weight wise, I'm at 6 foot. I would say that 275 would be your best bet weight class, based on the fact of just pure leverages and getting thicker to bench press. But, you know, there's been some tall, thinner guys in the 42s that have done some crazy shit. I mean, Larry Wheels is not a massive guy as far as waist size structure, or, you know, he's not like a fucking Bill Kazmaier, but he's lifting immensely huge weights. So in my opinion, weight class isn't as important as neurological proficiency and motor pattern. So if he has the best form he can have, he doesn't have to gain that extra 30 pounds. You know what I mean? The thing of it is, the bigger you get, the harder form is to break, because the thicker your midsection gets, the more stability you have on squatting and deadlifting and lifting massive weights, and the thicker you get here, the better the bench press, you know what I mean? So in theory, for leverages, yeah, gaining 30, 40 pounds for Pete would be good, but you can still beat that by being a technical master. You don't have to have that extra size to hit those big numbers. So it's kind of a toss-up. I think it could go either way.
It's very cool hearing all this, like I said earlier, just because, like, you know, even 3 years ago, I might scoff or not be interested in this kind of subject matter, but this is exactly the road I've started to go down, and it's fascinating to me. It's very enlightening to hear this kind of stuff, because you're going, you know, so many people get into this and they think of the shortcuts or what they can do and how to get as popular as they can and all this sort of stuff. But what you're saying is it's a long road. Take your time, build up your technical base, and worry about the weights later. Like, get that proficiency down, master the technique, hammer your weaknesses, and it'll all come together. And that is a phenomenal message that everyone needs to hear, because people don't think like that nowadays. It's all about social media. And I used to be the same way. I'm like, I gotta post something up because I'm gonna lose followers, or I need to gain followers. And I'm like, I don't like cussing a lot, but I don't give a crap what Joe Blow thinks about my freaking squat anymore, or like what I don't want to impress people. I don't care. Like, I'm just doing this for myself.
Yeah.
And
you know,
like you said,
really, what I think would really help powerlifting, in my opinion, is having more of an Olympic cycle where you only have a world championship every 4 years, because then people are going to start to come in and worry about what's really important. See, we got 15 different world championships and 25 different national titles and all this fucking horseshit. Now that all that matters is all-time world records, because everything else is bullshit, in my opinion, right? But the point is that you don't see Olympic athletes doing this bullshit, because they're so focused on winning that one contest every 4 fucking years that they only get 2 times, maybe in their whole career, they get to peak. So they're putting all their energy and efforts into making sure that everything's perfect to peaking every 4 years. And that's why all the studies, if you look at the Russian manuals, if you look at the Canadian hockey leagues, they're all based off of long-term thought processes and training, and that's what's created all the world records. You know? I mean, that's what you have to realize, you know?
That's awesome, man. It's like it's more of a long-term view than just, what could I get right now? That's amazing. That blows my mind. Just thinking about it. Like 4 years, yeah, it's totally different if your perspective is.
I would strongly recommend for the listeners to look up a guy named Istvan Bali. He was a world famous hockey coach from Canada. I believe he trained Wayne Gretzky, but he talks about 3 phases of training: long-term approach to high-level success, when I read his shit from Zatsiorsky and Dr. Kramer at Ball State, it blew my fucking mind at what this guy was talking about with long-term development. And I said, this is going to be my trick, because this is going to be my key to getting better and breaking records. Because, like I said, I've ran into all these next late and great people that are showing up. How can I win? I can win by outlasting everybody and outsmarting everybody, you know?
So I could talk to you all day, but so one, I want to say shout out to Jeff Rubish, man, because I know your dad watches this comments. So what's up, man? And would your fiance Pete, would she have any questions for Matt? Because I feel like, does she listen to these by any chance, or this one I feel like she would like it.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell her. Yeah, she usually listens after, but she's not in the room with me. I'm downstairs, so.
No, what do you want to know, like, from Matt? Because Matt, I feel like he knows everything.
Gosh, I don't even know. I'm taking advantage of this time talking to him to, like, figure all these things out. Or
sorry, Kelly. Sorry, you're missing out, Kelly. But okay, I got another thing. Dude, we haven't even asked him any West Side stories. Because we talked to Greg, and he had the craziest stories about Louis making out with his girlfriend while he was hitting world records and stuff. Like, he's like, yeah, I freaking squatted a world record, and then I look and Louis making out with my girlfriend. And I was like, this is amazing stuff. And I know how long were you at West Side? How long were you there?
So I started driving down the West Side and trained with Louis and Chuck and all those guys in 1999 and left in the end of 07. So I had pretty much maxed out what Indiana had to, and there was two different ways I could go. I could drive 2.5 hours north to Chicago and train with Eddie Cohen, or I could drive 2.5 hours east and train with Louis in Columbus. So I trained with Eddie occasionally and started training with Chuck more often, because once Eddie kind of semi-retired, there just was no more intensity at Quad's gym anymore. But when I went to West Side, it was like fucking everybody was like, had throats at each other's knives, knives at each other's throats, and we're fucking gonna just eat each other alive. So I'm like, this is the environment I need to be in to get stronger. I didn't really understand how much smarter I was gonna get until I started opening up the PLUSA magazines and then reading shit that Louis didn't understand at the time, but it was it was infatuating me as far as like, holy fuck, I don't know anything about training. This guy is all out of control. But I would say some of the craziest stories I ever had was we were eating at, do they still have tumbleweed restaurants around you guys? They're like a Tex-Mex grill. A lot of them are closed. But
I've never heard of
there's this tumbleweed. Okay, so it's like a Longhorn or like a Texas Roadhouse, but it's more Mexican style. And there was one right down from the old gym when it was on Demarest, and all of us went to eat there. And Rob Fuzner was there, and Rob Fuzner had seemingly more money than everybody else. Brand new Cadillac DTS, this was like a super hot car back then. And nobody really knew what he did. And then I remember the next, he's all over the news going to jail for having like 12 kilos of cocaine in the trunk. And went to prison for like 15 years. And I was eating with him the week before, and I was like, man, I'll bet the feds are following me and wondering what the fuck I'm doing driving back and forth from Indiana, right? Because I was just a kid at the time. I was 21, but that was pretty crazy, knowing I was sitting around with big cartel moving drug dealers at the time. And then, Dave Tate's intensity was just totally crazy, because on his way out of West Side, I was in my way in. So as a kid, he was still there, but he was slowly getting to the point where he was getting too beat up and old. But the amount of fighting and bickering that him, Louis, and Dave Tate would have in the gym was it was almost like eerie, because I wasn't friends with any of them at the time. So it was kind of like I was the outsider, so I just kind of stayed over in the corner and shut the fuck up and was like, these dudes are going to fucking kill each other. I mean, it was literally like being on a playground full of a bunch of fucking bullies, And I remember the first day I got respect over there, there was this big, fat black dude that used to live there. I can't remember his name. I want to say it was Tittle, but I don't remember what his last name was. And we were doing tricep rollbacks, like off the ground. And we were using 75-pound dumbbells, and I was beating this. And that's when Louis started watching me and go, holy shit, this dude's got some fucking balls, right? But one of the biggest stories I had training-wise was I go in there, and they're actually doing like a raw, almost like an opener type day where they were benching, but they were doing I didn't bring a bench shirt because I was doing everything raw back then. And I benched 500, and I'm only 19. And the guys are like, holy fuck, right? This dude's strong. And I remember George Halbert comes up to me and grabs the back of my tricep where I was telling you to work, Pete. And he goes, your triceps are fucking garbage. And he walked away from me. That's all he said to me. And I was just like, what the fuck? Like, I just benched 500 at 19, and this guy's like busting my fucking balls. But what I didn't realize was he was testing me. So I asked Louis when he left, I go, what the fuck's that guy's problem? Like, he just came up and grabbed my arm and told me I was fucking garbage and walked away. He goes, well, he wants you to work on some more triceps. You don't have a lot of muscle around your elbow, blah, blah, blah. So the next 6 months, I start fucking boom, boom, right? I'm doing tons of triceps. Well, I start building up that big medial head, and the next time he saw me, he saw that I'd been working on that weak area, and he literally dumped every ounce of knowledge he had into me. Because he saw that I wasn't there as an ego guy. I was going to come in and learn. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think of any other crazy. See, I was like that weird guy that I came in to learn everything and train hard, and Greg kind of came in between to train hard and party and get involved with a bunch of nasty bitches and like, you know, I mean, if Greg could have been contained, and he'll tell you straight up, if he could have been locked up in a fucking barrack and not allowed to drink or get into drugs or fuck around with dirty bitches, he would have been 200 pounds stronger back then than he was. He literally would train that hard from being fucking around in bars and doing nothing. But there was a lifter that trained with me and Greg named Jeremiah Myers. And Jeremiah was the only guy that I saw in that literally was too drunk to drive to the gym and could come in and deadlift 800 completely.
Oh, that's
you know. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking fucked up. Like couldn't get his car door open, fucked up. But he came in and he was deadlifting 800 with us that day. It was unbelievable.
It seemed like
one of the craziest.
No, go ahead.
Oh, one of the craziest stories and I have to think about it because it's been a while now. It's been nearly 15 years since I've been there. But Vlad Hasselhoff was there at the time I was there, and I remember Vlad coming in, and Louis was excited that he finally has this massive world record holder squat other than Chuck, you know. And he comes in, and I remember we're training for a couple, 3-4 weeks. We're getting ready for a competition right before me and Chuck Vogelpool leave. So this is like 2007. We're doing a circuit max phase, and there's 2 blues and a green on each side of the bar. That's 550 pounds of band tension, okay? Brand fucking new elite bands. Chuck puts 835 in plate weight plus those bands on the bar. Okay, do the math. 550 plus 835.
So we're like at 1,400 pounds.
1,350. It's insane. The bar was like fucking boom, right? Chuck gets underneath it, sets down on the, like maybe a 14-inch box right at parallel or maybe a little below her, and just boom, stands straight up with it. Like stands up with it so fast it almost comes off his back. And we're just watching this because we're realizing that probably nobody else in history is ever going to do this, other than possibly Vlad. Vlad's like, I want to try. And we're like, no, dude, don't try that. Like, Chuck's fucking crazy. Vlad did not want him to be beaten. He gets underneath it and gets fucking plastered to the box. I mean, he literally just fucking boom. I mean, we're picking it up off of him, and now we're scared because if this weight falls, it's going to tear one or all of our arms off, right? We put it all back up into the monolith, and Vlad's fucking pissed off because Chuck just beat him. And he goes, I want to try it again. And we're like, no,
God.
No, you're done. He gets under it again, and he gets fucking plastered worse. Okay? So now, the average person, they would have had to go to the fucking hospital, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks later, he cuts the circuit max loose. 2 weeks later, Chuck goes to the meet and bombs out, and Vlad squats the all-time world record, 1250.
Wow.
What is that? Is that just the peak too early? Or what are we talking here?
Well, you know, what's funny was Vlad was one of those guys that he would train in the gym and look terrible. He would look terrible in technique. He would look terrible in straining ability. He would look like he was just not there. And then when he got into comp mode and he was in a competition, watch the fuck out. That dude was out of control. But, I mean, he was the first. I don't think Louis ever counted him in that, but he was the first 900-pound deadlifter from Westside. You know, he couldn't beat Chuck on circuit max squats. He couldn't beat Chuck on pin pulls. Chuck was a gym lifter, and Vlad was a competition lifter.
Wow.
I saw things that Chuck did in the gym that I'll probably never see again.
I got 2 questions off of that. Like, Greg was saying he didn't think the banded box squats carried over to competition, and that was one thing that pissed him off. And was that the case with Chuck's squats? That the reason he would smoke these incredible banded box squats and then bomb out into meat? Because Greg said he didn't agree with that.
Well, Greg said he figured
There's
it
a
out.
lot of different.
He figured it out.
I'll tell you my thought process on it, and Greg will probably restate and agree. Greg's technique was atrocious, okay? And Chuck's technique was fucking impeccable. But here's the deal. The reason that Chuck's box squats did not translate over to meat squats is because Chuck got too ramped up in a competition. He could not stay calm enough to focus the lifts, but he was calm in the gym. So in the gym, he was out to take your head off, but he could do it in a calm state where he was kind of in control in his environment. That was his environment. As soon as he went out of his environment, he wasn't any good. Vlad was, for some reason, not a great trainer, but a great competitor. But he could stay super calm. Like, you could go up and talk to Vlad in between squats, and Vlad was just like another day in the fucking park until like the last 5 seconds. Chuck was like this in the fucking corner, like pissed off 3 hours before the meet. You get what I'm saying? So I don't think it had to do with box squats didn't translate. What I think that if you go back and look at a lot of Greg's all-time squat videos, that Greg had a grinder gear that almost nobody ever had, but Greg was not patient enough to change motor patterns and have perfection of technique. If Greg would have been able to step back and not take it so fast, and, you know, and I think the one big thing is if I could, I was one of the, me and Chuck and I were the technical masters at Westside at that time, but I was the patient one, and Greg was patient while I was there. But once I left and Chuck left, Greg was the top tier guy, and Greg couldn't take coaching unless it was from me or Chuck. He'll tell you that straight up. So I was trying to slow him down and fix all of his technique, and Louis was just impressed by the amount of grinding he could do. Therefore, even though his technique was off, Louis was just like, fuck it, right? So I think the box squats would have translated better if Greg would have worked more to be technical. But Greg is right in the sense that if Greg would have worked more freestyle squatting because his technique was so bad, it would have been better for him. That's where it becomes individual, right? So yes, at certain times, maybe if I give Pete box squats, they're going to work really well for him this cycle because it maybe be something he would need. But at that time, Greg needed more freestance squats, and Chuck's technique was so good, it didn't matter if it was off a box or make sense?
Yes, makes perfect sense. So was Chuck like probably Chuck and Dave Tay, were they like the craziest guys you trained around at Westside? Who was the guy who impressed you the most besides Chuck? Or was Chuck the top tier? There's no one like him?
There's different reasons for different lifts. Chuck, as far as squatting is concerned, technically and strength-wise and speed-wise, I've never seen anybody else like him. You're talking bench press-wise, I would say the most impressive person I saw in the beginning was Kenny Patterson. Kenny Patterson had the build. He was 5'6", 250, and all fucking upper body, just huge, right? Saw him do, a 625 or 630 floor press when I was like 19. Just stupid shit, right? In the deadlift, I never saw anybody quite like Vlad. Vlad had this technique and power position that he could get into that was just crazy. Now, Chuck off of pins, Chuck could pin pull things that were unbelievable. I remember deadlifting with no straps, like 1025, and nobody had even done 960 yet as far as off the floor. Chuck just had a hard time translating pin pulls to the comps. And I think a lot of it was because he just burnt so much squatting. I think if Chuck would have ever went to a deadlift only meet, he probably would have pulled right around 900 pounds, but he was just, he squatted a world record before that. So it gets to be a little bit more tedious. As far as body weight's concerned, I've never seen anybody like George Halbert. George Halbert did a 635 bench at 230 body weight, maybe when I was 20 years old, and his speed work was impeccable, So his speed training, George's speed training in Maximum was just absolutely insane. Louis was, one of those guys that he impressed everybody because no matter how bad he hurt or how much he did not sleep the night before, he would come in and try to hang and bang with us a little bit, which I don't think was a good thing at that time. It still is not. I mean, he just can't let go. But watching his determination, when you walked in, no matter how bad your knee felt or your neck or your shoulder, you weren't going to say anything in front of Chuck or Louis because those guys were 10 times more beat up and they were going to try to lift 10 times more weight than you,
Yeah, that's what we've heard. It's just like there were no excuses. Like you just had to push through and persevere. Now that reminds me though, like you said, the 900-pound puller, first guy was Vlad, and wasn't there a guy like 5 years ago from Westside who pulled 900 in a meet? I'm trying to remember his name. What happened to him?
Yeah.
I know who is that?
Honestly, see, the thing is so when I left in the end of 2007, I completely severed almost every tie I had. And the reason that happened was because I was the first guy to leave Westside and do better without the gym. So you got to understand how that made Louis feel. I mean, when I left Westside, I was the 7th best in the world, and within 9 months, I was the best in the world. And then I maintained that position until I flipped to Raw and then became one of the best Raw lifters in the world without one spec. So I never, Greg and George both told Louis that I wasn't even close to my potential and he was a dumb shit for kicking me out. Well, I proved that to be right, and that really pissed him off because most people that leave Westside, as you just asked me, you never hear from them again.
That makes a lot of sense. Wow.
Yeah, so even though I see Louis every once in a while out in public and we say hi to each other, I'm the only guy that's ever left and done better. So that really puts a thorn in his side because he started to realize that I had outgrown his system and I had outgrown his knowledge and I had went further than he was capable of being able to hand me. So that's kind of why there's so much this, and you can sense it so much in that documentary. But as you can see in the documentary, I'm the only one talking with any fucking sense. You know what I mean? So.
Well, I feel like you're the more logical, well thought out. Honestly, I mean, I'm not trying to be like smarter, just someone who's really put a lot of time into learning, and like you're very patient and everything. And it's just the difference. You're not all about intensity all the time.
I've always looked for ways to outsmart shit, I mean, I've had enough genetic potential to reach world records, but to stay there and sustain that, I had to be smarter than everybody else. And you can say you live the gym, and that's awesome. You can say you live and breathe working out. But that also includes studying and making yourself smart. And a lot of guys that get to that level, they don't think that they need to do that, and that's a huge no-no.
Well, Greg said that by far he felt like you were the best lifter there in Westside. Easily. He said that. He was like, hands down, Matt Wenning was the best lifter, and Louis kicked him out. And he was just like, he thought it was just the craziest thing in the world. He was like, what the hell, dude? That guy's the best lifter in this gym. What are you doing?
Yeah, and I actually proved that to be somewhat right. But, the thing of it is that Louis has a personality that, like I said, I'm not busting his balls, but I'll tell you what his issue is. Louis pretends to not have an ego and wants to just and pretends to tell everybody that just get better, and I don't care about how you get better. I just want you to be the best. But as soon as it's not his way, or he thinks that you're not doing what he thinks is better for you or better for the gym, he has no problems getting rid of you. So he literally thought, I'll tell you the big thing that was the big cut, the final cut. Me and him got into it one day at the gym. That was the final straw. But before that, looking back, I started looking for pro strength conditioning jobs, and I actually had gotten hired by the Cleveland Browns. Okay, now when I went and got hired by the Cleveland Browns, this was a $150,000 a year job right out of grad school, which was fucking awesome, right? But Louis looked at that as, well, Matt doesn't give a shit about lifting. He just wants to be a strength coach. You get what I'm saying? So when I'm trying to better myself in a career that gave me a position to have a pro job, not very long out of school, who the fuck is going to turn that down, right? Now, the big thing is that the people that hired me for that job, they all got fired within 2 weeks of hiring me, so I never worked a day. But in Louis' mind, that always said Matt's looking for something else. He's not looking to just be a great lifter, you know? So I think that was one of the big first things that kind of started to have the issue with him and I, was the fact that he knew I was trying to better myself and find the best positions and jobs that I could to make a big difference. You know what I mean? And to him, that was a problem with, hey, I'm not gonna give my all at the gym because my mind is focused somewhere else. Little did he know I was smart enough that I could focus on multiple things and be good at it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think your track record speaks for itself. So you proved everybody, you know, what was up. You showed everybody what was up. So.
And it's like Louis, he made a lot of money doing heavy equipment operating. It's like, bro, like these guys are freaking dying over here, starving, living in their cars and stuff. What the hell, you know? You want to make your life.
Look at it as a package. And you got to understand too is that Louis was really good about living below his means, and that's why he had extra money. But Louis really didn't have a whole lot of money or extra things until he got that settlement from the hospital. That when they fucked him all up under anesthesia, that's when he got a lot of money. So he never made a lot of money in construction. He never made a lot of money at the gym. He made a lot of money from medical settlements because they actually killed him on the table, brought him back, and then they tried to hide that they didn't do that.
Wow.
Holy crap.
And that's why go back and watch that West Side versus the World, and he talks about it. But he got a huge settlement from that, and that's when the gym came out of the garage and actually went to a facility. Make sense?
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when he said he like died and came back, but I didn't realize all that went into that. So, damn.
Yeah.
So is Vlad the current? Is the guy we're talking about? That's the current squat raw world record holder, right? This guy. And where the hell is that guy at?
Yeah.
Where's he at now? Is he in Russia or something?
He lives in. I think he's back in Iran. So he was a Soviet defector to Iran. At least his parents were. So he was over here at Westside for a while, and then I knew his brother lived in New York. But I'm pretty sure he's back over in Europe somewhere. I know he still trains pretty hard, but yeah, we still talk every once in a while on Facebook and stuff. We're trying to get him to do him and Greg to do a seminar together, right? Get him back over here and kind of do like a Westside / world record fucking, you know, alumni seminar. You know what I mean? So we've been talking about that a little.
Man, that'd be crazy.
I love Greg, man. Like when we did, I don't know how, you know, but I didn't know who Greg was. I had no idea. I never heard of this guy. Like, you know, I even told Greg, I was like, you know, because he's like, so what's going on with this podcast thing? And I was like, dude, I was just telling Pete that there's some guy that was better than Chuck that no one knows who he is, and I don't even know who he is. and Greg and Pete knew who he was, you know. And I told
Pete
Greg that. I was like, Pete,
just like we were just talking though. Greg was one of the best lifters from 2007 to 2010, and you don't know who he is. You get my point? So it's like I was telling Pete, like, do everything super smart, be super educated in what you do, because, you know, if I wasn't smart and articulated and had all these military and fire contracts and, you know, all this other shit, I'd be a fucking nobody for my lifting, and I was one of the greats in my era.
Man, is that depressing, or is it just make you realize like you gotta think about the long term? Because I mean, at times I've had a hard time coming to terms with it, where it's like, oh, you're not always going to be the man. People are, you know, other guys are going to come along and do better than you, and you're going to kind of fizzle out. And that was hard for me to accept for a while. But now I'm
Yeah.
realizing like it's just different course of life, like different stages. But it is.
Yeah.
You always want to be the
You got-
best, I think.
Yeah, you got to outthink the stages, and you got to realize that all you have to prove is that when you're at your prime, that you're the best in that fucking era. You can't compare Kazmaier to, you know, fucking Gary Frank and like all these other. There's no comparison. Like different rules, different times, different training regimens, different drugs, different different nutrition, different education. You know, so to me, it's kind of like, you know. There's only going to be a handful of guys that go down and be ultimately remembered, and none of them are going to be powerlifters, right? I mean, you look at the 90s, the top athlete ever from the 90s that'll be remembered is Michael Jordan, period, in the story,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
You look back at the 2000s, you're probably looking at Lakers, right? Shaq and Kobe are probably going to be the two that's remembered. And I'm not sure there's a lot of football guys in there in between, too. I'm just saying that in general, there's only a handful of guys in each sport that are remembered, and there's only how many registered powerlifters? 10,000? Come on, man. You know, it's like you have to do this kind of shit for internal, intrinsic factors. I just walk around with the level of, like you will one day, Pete, too. I walk around with a level of accomplishment personally. It's not an ego. It's I did everything I could do at the time that I had and the amount of effort I put in. Now, the only people I think that have regrets are the people that didn't use their prime correctly, right? I mean, what else could I do? I trained as hard as I could train. I ate as clean as I could eat. I slept as much as I was supposed to. I stayed away from stressful situations, and I made the biggest numbers I could make. I'm comfortable with that. Somebody comes along and beats me, who gives a fuck, right? So now you have to look at all the other accomplishments that you have in your life. You know, I went and got a master's degree from one of the top schools in the world. I've had huge military contracts. I trained 5 fire departments. I got a great gym. Show me another lifter that's had that level of success in all of those faucets. And see what I mean? That's the type of feeling that I have now is I gave everything I had in my prime. I gave everything I had physically. Now I still train and I have fun with it. And, you know, every once in a while I dabble in the fact I could probably still compete a little bit here and there. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty satisfied with what I did. And that's all you can ask for in whatever you do is just be satisfied with the numbers you hit and try to walk away with some level of physical dignity and not let things chew you up. You know, no matter how good you get now, there's always going to be somebody that comes along that's better. My point exactly is Ed Cohen broke 70-something world records. How many of those world records are still have his name on them? I don't think very many.
No, I mean things are getting broken left and right now. So you just it's gotten insane. I mean, whoever thought someone would bench 770 pounds raw? It's just, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. That 1,100 pound deadlifts and crazy stuff like that. So it's puts everything into perspective, and I think that's a smart approach. Is there anything?
And you got to
go
remember
ahead.
too, like if you stopped right now, Pete, the thing of it is you're still stronger than 99.9% of anybody that's ever fucking lived. You know, you have to look at it in that perspective. You can't. You can't look at it. I mean, there's always going to be freaks. I mean, there's always going to be guys that come along. But at the end of the day, if you were the best in your time period, then that's all you can ask for.
I like that. Is there anything you want to wrap up with, Scott? Or
Yeah, I just want to say I love Greg Panora, man. Like, since we did the podcast with Greg, I've been texting him like all day, dude. Every day we're just texting, and that guy. I kind of compared Louis Simmons to Customato when we were talking. And when you were talking about Vlad and Chuck, I was like, dude, this is exactly how fighters are. Like, what you're talking about is like fighters, there's those gym fighters, and then those guys that they compete really well. There's the certain dudes like Conor McGregor, he loves the day of pressure. And something I would take away, it's weird because I just like this is like revelation. I don't even know. I'm going to just ask you about this. But Greg, he kind of reminded me of Mike Tyson a little bit, like he needed Louis, and he was it kind of really messed him up. I feel like, you know, when he left West Side, he was like tailspin out of control. His life was really chaotic, and he's opened up a lot to me about his life, his personal life, and I'm like, wow. And he's like, you know, they say you like someone wears their heart on their sleeve. Greg wears his heart on his sleeve like more than anybody. But I feel like, Matt, I feel like you don't at all, bro. Like, is that true? Like, I feel like there's a lot that people don't know about you. I really do. Because I kind of pick up on people a lot too, and there's certain things I'm like, I don't want to ask this guy this question because I don't have a clue how he's gonna respond. You know what I mean? Like, I can't.
Honestly, I mean, I might have that like aura to me, but honestly, I just don't have anything to hide. That's the thing with me is like my life's pretty boring. I don't drink. I don't even drink coffee. You know, I mean, I go to the gym. I think I try to put a lot of my energy into helping these kids that are just, you know, I train my nuts off and I fucking sleep and eat, man. I mean, it's just what I talk about and what I write about and what I do is just my entire life. I just don't. I guess in one perspective, I'm just kind of boring. I just never, you know, getting into drugs never really got into me. I wasn't really ever chasing girls around a ton. To me, it was just like I had to have everything focused to be what I was. And now I just have this sit back kind of, you know, I still like to go in and grind, but I just.
Are you married? Do you have a family or anything?
No.
You didn't, you know.
No, so
Okay.
I have a younger sister, and they have kids, and I'm pretty close with my mom, and my grandma's still around, which is pretty cool. So she's went on tons of motorcycle rides with me. So we went to, I think we've talked about that, but we went to Montana and back, and then we went to Nova Scotia and back. So she's put about 20 or 30,000 miles on my Harley with me. So I'm pretty close with her. So it's weird seeing her getting in her mid 80s now because she can't really do any of that shit anymore. But 10 years ago, we were doing a lot.
And do you? I like to ask. This is my big thing, and Pete too. You know, I like what Pete's told me about it. But do you have faith in God or anything like that? Do you believe in? You know, does anything like that inspire you or help you through life? You know, Julius, I know that's
Yeah, it's kind of a twisty road on that. I mean, my dad was massively Catholic. I grew up very strict Catholic, and when my mom died, it kind of fractured all that. And my mom kind of gave us a choice to go back to church. And I guess at a certain point, probably from 13 to like 30, I blamed a lot of. No, 30. I still had some shit going. I had some shit getting together, but I would say 13 to like 22, 23. I had a lot of animosity towards that type of shit just based on the fact that I watched my dad like go to church and do all the right things and be a strict guy like that, and then just find out he has cancer and gets smoked in 6 months and leaves all of us kind of like up in the air going, what the hell is this kind of shit? So I don't really have, I don't know. I think that maybe there probably is something beyond what we do here, but I don't know what that is. And like I said, I think probably through that particular time of my development, that changed a lot of how I thought about that kind of shit. Because I've met a lot of the worst people I've ever met in my life in a church. As far as when I was a kid, you know, a lot of the kids that were just assholes and would do nasty shit, they were all in my Sunday school. You know, and I'm just thinking, what the fuck? You know, like this is totally crazy. But like I said, I think everybody has their own thought process on that stuff. I don't say that I don't believe, but like I said, when you have something like that happen at that point in your life, and you climb yourself out of that situation, it's kind of one of those things where you sit back and it does make you wonder if that stuff is legit. And then you just hear about all this poorly done shit at churches and all these kids getting molested by popes and fucking preachers, and you're just like, man, this is just crazy, you know? But like I said, I don't judge people for how they think or feel or what they want to believe. I think that's great. I think at the end of the day, all religions are just teaching us to treat everyone better and to do the right things and to not take advantage of people or positions and just be good people, you know. And if your religion's telling you to do that, then I'm 100% for it.
Yeah, and I know, like for me, I haven't always been the most vocal, and I don't push anything on anybody. but I've like developed more self-confidence to be a little more open about my beliefs over the years. And I'm not like lecturing people, but I believe in God and everything. And I've tried to grow closer because, like you said too, I feel like just being a better person, that goes a long ways. And in this sport, I mean, there are a lot of good people, but there's a lot of not so good people as well. And just like anything, and I get what you're saying, because I see these televangelical pastors who are making $750 million, and I'm like, and they're just saying a bunch of stuff that's not even, just to benefit them. And I don't buy into that. So I do think there's a lot of good and bad, but it's definitely something I've tried to embrace more of. So
Sure.
Scott,
I agree.
Well, it's interesting. I've been talking to Greg a lot about this, and Sunday is Easter, right? This Sunday.
Yes, sir.
So today would be the day that Jesus was crucified, and so what you're talking about there, just to point it out, it's like Jesus was crucified by the religious people. Exactly what you're talking about. The Jewish people. People started saying, "Oh, this guy, he's the savior, he's the Messiah," and all this stuff. And the religious people were like, "No, we're the ones. We're the holy people. We're the people." And so they demanded for him to be crucified, killed. I mean, he straight up was freaking nailed to a cross and killed. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that at all. I was telling Greg, I said, dude, the Apostle Paul, he killed Christians. That's what he did. He was a Christian killer, and then he got converted. And this is on me too. I just want to share it real quick. But when you're talking about it really like I was like really impressed by what you're saying about the Olympic lifters. Every 4 years they try to peak. And for me, my whole life changed when I started looking at, because I do believe in God, and I look at life eternally, not just this little 100 years. Everybody's got a maximum of 100 years, but I believe in eternal life. And I believe that the reason we're here is, to live beyond, to live eternally. And it's great to hear that your dad was Catholic, and I believe he's in heaven, man. That's what I believe, dude. And I'm really sorry that happened, because that's really freaking, I can't even imagine, dude, being 13 years old and going through that. But it sounds like from your life, it seems like there was some miracles there. The fact that you lived, you got in that car accident, the fact that you found the gym, which is the Young Man's Christian Association, right? YMCA. Yeah. It is, dude. There's a guy benching 500 pounds. I haven't seen too many of those guys in the YMCA, and that's great. But I just want to say that stuff, man. And freaking, that's cool that your dad believed, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I mean, we respect the hell out of you, so appreciate you coming on and everything. Like, for real. I know I haven't talked to you much. I haven't gotten the chance to talk to a lot of people, but seriously, I'm even more impressed with you now, as a person and as a lifter and everything. Like, nothing but respect for you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Well, I hope you guys have a good Easter, and we'll have to do this some other time. We have to figure out how to do like some kind of a four-way with Greg.
Yes,
because he might remember more shit from West than I do.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
Hey, we'll do that 100%. And yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, both of you guys. Matt, I feel like it's so enlightening to hear you talk. It's so good. And I appreciate everything. And I would love to do this again with you. And me and Peter are doing this on Friday. So.
All right, man. No problem. Yeah. I'm pretty chill these next couple of weeks until this Corona shit clears out. So just let me know.
All right, man. I will. I'll hit you up.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Thanks. We'll see you, buddy.
The underground sound in a city or a town, the frown. The business of a crown, of the living that abounds, of the church and the announcements. It's doing what counts. The underground sound in a city or a town of frown. The business of a crown, or the living that abounds in the church of the announcements. It's doing what counts. The underground sound is the voice within, to give ear to the spirit and to flee from sin, to live for Jesus in the praise of him, by not selling out for the praise of men, to do whatever it takes, no matter what the cost, to keep pushing up the weight, carrying the cross, straight bench pressing sin, defend the word that lacks, and your best mention him, or then you gon' die, cause the underground sound ain't a city or a town. The business of a crown.